Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. This is Orphanlast, aka Skylar Madison, and today I'm coming at you with a Noblefrugal Studio collaboration video where I'm drawing out a background for Noblefrugal Studio, and he will then grab a hold of the content, grab a hold of this background, and make a nice little animation with it. And it's going to be him teaching you guys how to make a complex scene with open tunes. Now, he's got a good teaching style. If you guys would like to take a look at his channel, a link to his channel will be supplied in the video description below. And the content that you've been looking at the screen right now so far is basically different iterations that this background has gone throughout this process. And I felt like including that in this video because this is the first time in the coloring process where I actually feel happy with the results, like to the point to where I feel a boost of confidence. Like I've said a few times in the past, I don't have much experience coloring my backgrounds, and this is the first time while coloring the background where I actually feel like, hey, you know, I can do this. This is really good. And so, you know, that's where I'm coming from, where that's concerned. Now, I was thinking about including this video in the curvilinear perspective playlist that exists on my channel, but I ultimately decided not to do that, primarily because I'm not even really using curvilinear perspective rules in order to create the shadows in this image, and I didn't really see any reason to, primarily because, first of all, it's 180 degrees. All the shadows are ultimately going to be going the same direction throughout the entire process of making the image. So there really wasn't any point in me going this extra mile and doing curvilinear perspective work with the shadows. Not only that, but you know, just shadows in general, linear or curvilinear techniques is actually something that's kind of new to me because I've never had a need to make shadows, I guess. I don't know why this is something that's new to me, but you know, it's, you know, we learn at our own pace and in our own time and everything. But basically the general concept of it is you need to have a vanishing point up in the sky, and that represents the light source, and directly below the light source you have another vanishing point. The vanishing point in the sky basically collides and passes by all of the corners of the object that happen to be up, and then the vanishing point that happens to be on the bottom collides and passes by all the corners of the buildings that happen to be on the ground. And that tells you the angle, and it tells you the measurement, basically just how big this shadow needs to be, and everything like that. And so if I was doing this with pencil and paper, there would be a lot more complex stuff going on here. And I wouldn't even be close to finishing off any of the shadows. Now, by the end of this video, I have 90% of the shadows complete. The other 10% are things that have to do with minutia, things that, you know, it just takes time to do. And, yeah. But really, most of what I'm doing is I'm creating a big square on the ground, and it's created basically because like these squares on the ground, they're created because the vanishing point up in the sky and the vanishing point on the ground, by the time that they hit the ground, by the time that the vanishing point up in the sky hits the ground, it will collide with the lines that you've drawn from the vanishing point on the ground, and that tells you where these corners on the building intersect. and that's pretty much it. The most complex portion of this video takes place when I wind up working on the gray and red building, that the first building that I drew out in this series. And the reason why it was the most complex shadow is because it's such a tall building that its shadow wound up colliding with another building. Now, the technique that I used, excuse me by the way, the technique that I used there in order to determine just how high up this shadow should go on this other building, and it was determined. Well, I don't know how accurate it was determined necessarily. Like I said, I'm not too experienced making shadows or anything like that, but I decided that, okay, I drew this line from the light source vanishing point up in the sky that basically passed by this corner on the right corner of the gray and red building. And I'm like, okay, well, what if I draw a line straight up from the left corner until it intersects with that same line, and then I draw a straight line from there, from that intersection point, straight towards the building, and then I think I even used the actual light source to determine where they intersect, and that is where ultimately I decided, okay, that's how high this shadow will go onto this building. Now, regardless of how accurate this is mathematically as a technique, in the end, the result looks pretty good, in my opinion. And, even if it may be wrong, which I'm not sure if it is, even if it may be wrong, a lot of artwork is pretty much just how your brain interprets reality, or how that artist interprets reality. And so this is a representation of how I interpret reality, and such like that. Now, there are exceptions to the rule. I think artwork, it can be other things than just reality. For example, I find graphic design to be a form of artwork. So if a graphic designer were to sit down and make this image and compose it with all the rules of graphic design and everything, and let's say this guy goes ahead and he makes a bunch of interesting designs and stuff like that and puts them all together, and let's say every time I look at it I see a different image, I see something different, something new. I mean, have you ever just laid down on the ground or on the floor or something, and just looked at it, looked at the ceiling, and saw a pattern or something just done with some drywall spackling or something like that, and just thought, hey, that looks like something, and I'd drawn an image from it, just actually drawn something from it using it as a reference. I mean, it's not like any real thought process was made with this guy with this little stucco trowel or whatever it is that he uses as a little spackler. But even still, you're able to derive something artistic from it. I've always appreciated things like that, and so but in the case with a graphic designer, it would be more intentional. If I'm able to look at an image that's not necessarily a representation of anything real, or a representation of what somebody thinks is an approximation of real life, I can still appreciate it if it follows those sort of rules. That's my perspective, at least. There are, like I said, there are exceptions, but I feel like artwork should try to emulate reality for the most part. Now earlier you saw me basically do what I was describing earlier. I drew that line going straight up to determine just how high this shadow needs to go up this building here. And let's see here. Go ahead and transform it to that line that's going off, the red line that's going into the perspective of the building. I had a lot of difficulty transforming this guy and trying to get it into the shape that I needed to get it in order to fit into perspective and everything like that. And just generally, you wind up playing around with these quite a bit, just trying to get them to work out. But you know, as long as you don't fixate on one point of your transformation box or whatever, and you're actually transitioning, going back and forth to the other corners of the square while transforming the image, as long as you're transitioning all over this box a lot, and I would say even zooming in if you're using Krita. Zooming in when you're using Krita will make it so that the fidelity of the control is better, and it won't just kind of bounce around into these areas you don't necessarily want to transform the object towards. Like, as long as you're able to do those sorts of things, Krita will be totally capable of doing anything that you need it to do. And right here, at this point I was thinking, oh yeah, I'm pretty much almost nearly finished with making my shadows, but it turned out that there was actually a lot more work needing to be done. And I just basically it's just a step by step. Sometimes you don't know what you need to do. Now, one thing that you might notice out of real life, some people don't notice this. When you look at a building, look at where it's projecting the shadow. Then look at the faces of the building. Now, it's the faces that happen to be casting the shadow actually have the shadow on those faces. If you walk around the building and everything and look at all the other faces, they've got sunlight on them, and so they don't have any shadow on the face itself unless there's some sort of overhang or something like that. And so I decided to pretty much do that same thing. Had I known that I was going to do that, I would have, like, here you see me creating this silhouette right here. And I basically copied what was already there, created the silhouette, and then put it on the ground. Had I known that I was going to do that, I would have just, left the silhouette there, copied it, and pasted it. But and keeping all that on their own layers. That would have saved a lot of time, but yeah. Here I start playing around with blending modes, and I find that I think it's Soft Light Photoshop. That specific blending mode really seems to look really nice, but somehow I need to get some darker tones into the image. What I'm liking about the Soft Light blending mode is just how it's able to adopt the colors around it and make everything look real good. I might play with some other blending modes as well, just to see how they turn out. But as it currently stands, this, like, even with this as what's there for now, I'm really happy with these results right now. Now, there may come a point where I might just use this as a selection layer, and I might just, put on the shadows with just darker tones of paint and stuff like, or digital paint, and just work with it like that. But who knows? Like, the workflow for this is kind of like, I think throughout most of the week how I'm going to do this, and then once I finish doing my animation work, I start working on this. And since I've spent a good amount of time thinking about, okay, what comes next, I already know by the time that I sit down what my workflow is going to be. But since all of my time this week has basically been on working on animation, and all of my attention has been on the animation, I spent literally all night working on this. Of course, I took a few breaks so that I could educate myself further on animation, and then I after watching about an hour of content on how to animate better, I went ahead and I'd work for another 2 to 3 hours on this, and then I'd watch another video or two on animating, and I'm talking about animation courses that I've actually paid for. I'm not just going onto YouTube and watching tutorials. I'm actually watching professional animators giving advice and everything like that. I take my channel seriously, and I need to make sure that I can provide the best information as possible, because evidently people are mistaking my channel as me teaching people how to animate, and I don't think I'm quite there yet. I will be eventually, but I'm not there yet. I can teach people how to use OpenTunes, the program, the software. I can teach that. I can teach curve linear perspective, at least to a specific point, but that point that I'm able to teach it at is, in my opinion, much further than most of the books that are in English that talk about curve linear perspective. So, there's that. So right at this point, I decided to turn the blending mode back to normal, but the actual thought process of turning off the actual coloring and using the fill just didn't seem to work out very well, because I noticed that earlier, having the blending mode on and turning off all the colors, I wouldn't be able to see any of the shadows. So I started to kind of do things with the color on, trying to make the shadows with the color, only that I wasn't able to use the fill tool, primarily because the color is turned on and there's a lot of different colors all over the place, so I'd only be filling like an inch here, an inch there, and I didn't really want to deal with that sort of frustration. So I started to just kind of color things like you would with just Crayola crayons or something, and it didn't really work out very well. So I decided, okay, well, I'll just turn off the blending mode, and then I'll be able to use the fill tool again. And at this point right here, I was kind of confused, because I had things on different layers and everything, and just slowed me down a little bit. I'm still kind of getting used to Krita a little bit, and also Krita and its use of in a workflow dealing with painting your artwork. So this is before the video began, and this is after, and I really think the image is starting to pop. So that pretty much concludes it for this video, ladies and gentlemen. If you liked it, please like, share, and subscribe, and if you didn't like it, please like, share, and subscribe anyways.